Resilience. I'm John Biggs. Today we have Peter Goldsborough from Rune Technologies. You're DC-based. Peter, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
So it doesn't sound like you're originally from the Beltway, though.
No, not at all. I'm originally from Europe, actually. I was born in Austria, raised there, and then came here a couple of years ago, but originally from Europe.
All right, excellent. So you got a foot in both continents. So tell me a little bit about Rune. What are you guys building?
Yeah, Rune Technologies is a company focused on military logistics technology. In the past, worked for other great defense technology companies. Eventually realized that nobody was focused on logistics, which didn't quite make sense because most major wars in history were won or lost based on logistics. So saw a gap in the market under national security and decided to found Rune Technologies to focus that same innovation on one thing only, and that's logistics in the military.
Okay. So what does it mean ironically, my dad was in military logistics. He was at DCSC in Columbus. And from what I remember, he was like in a warehouse full of asbestos and a bunch of paper forms and some guys sitting around at desks. And they eventually computerized in the 90s. What does military logistics look like now? Just to give people an idea of what the complexity here.
Yeah, the depots have digitized slightly, but you'd be surprised that once you go into the actual field, right, if you were in a trench in Ukraine right now, the recording of supplies and who has what and where it is all still analog. That's still on paper, or if it's digital, it's on spreadsheets. And so there has been very little focus on it, right? Because, as you can imagine, logistics is always the last thing people think about, right? It's not shiny. It doesn't go boom. It's not sexy. So technologically, it's atrophied. And so it's a slight step up from 50 years ago, but much less than other parts of the military have increased in innovation.
And you guys have Tyros OS? Is that how you pronounce it?
TIROS, yeah.
TIROS,
it's named after the Nordic god of war, Tyr.
Okay. Oh, Tyr. Yeah, exactly. So what is that? What does that do for logistics?
Yeah. So TIROS is a software that manages really all aspects of military logistics. At the most basic level, it tracks inventory, right? Inventory of supplies, inventory of vehicles, inventory of personnel, inventory of medical equipment. But then really the power of it is in how it combines all of that into decision support. So for example, if there's a unit that needs fuel in the front lines, or a HIMARS battery that needs ammunition, TIROS can figure out what's the best way to get it fuel or ammunition based on everybody's inventory, how the fastest way to get there, who can move it, who can man the vehicles to move the equipment if it is manned. So it combines all the data. It does it predictively, so it does predictive logistics, looking forward into the future based on the demand that is being observed. And it also does it ahead of time. So, much logistics is the kind of thing where the better you do it ahead of time in planning, the fewer problems you have in the actual fight. And so logistics helps our TIROS helps our customers plan their logistics footprint ahead of time. How do
you ensure that, somebody's typing in that they ate one MRE? It seems like the last thing you want to be doing on a battlefield is managing logistics, like filling out a logistics form or filling out like a requisition form or saying that something's been used. How do you manage all that stuff?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different ways, right? So for MREs, for example, obviously not every time somebody eats an MRE does that get updated.
Sure.
At some level of granularity, somebody starts counting how many boxes are left, and that's when it becomes inventory. For other commodities like fuel, for example, right? Most vehicles have fuel gauges, and so you can actually know when fuel gets expended. And so that can come back, even digitally sometimes, right? There's a big push to sensorize more of the military. When it comes to logistics, not everything will be sensorized, certainly not in the short term. But as more sensors come online to measure, every time the HIMARS shoots a rocket, that can actually send back signal. Right now, there isn't really any software that catches that signal. And that's, again, where TIROS comes in to be that sort of digital backbone that catches the consumption data and proliferates it back to the defense industrial base.
What would warfare look like if you guys, or when you guys are successful, when that MRE signals that it's being eaten, or when that HIMARS missile goes off?
Yeah, first of all, I think it would look successful for the U.S. military and its allies, right, which is the most important thing. But I think it actually flip it around, like what would happen if we don't succeed and build the things that we're building? Logistics right now is, it's functional, right? The military is able to sustain its forces, somewhat, but that's also because that is possible at the current pace of warfare. What I think of is, if we were in a near-peer conflict, the pace at which the fighting were to happen would just be so quick that the amount of planning that's involved, the amount of manual processing involved right now, just wouldn't scale anymore. Right? So you couldn't actually plan fast enough compared to how quickly the battlefield is moving. The big thing that happens when that happens is that logistics becomes reactionary, right? So you're no longer kind of like having the upper hand, making sure ahead of time the units have what they need. you're just getting requests thrown at you. You kind of, try to do the best you can. And then ultimately you run out of things and potentially, fail your mission. And so if we succeed, then, that does not happen. We keep the upper hand and stay in control of the fight.
Interesting. How many clients do you guys have? Who's using this?
Yeah, right now we're working with the U.S. Army and the U.S. Marine Corps. We're about to announce some expansions into further services. What we've built is quite generalized. We started with the Army and the Marine Corps, but we're already quickly expanding to other services, as well as strategically beyond even services to other aspects of the DoD that deal with logistics as well.
And how has it been selling into, especially DoD and the U.S.?
Well, when we started Rune and we were pitching investors, we told them we know that the only thing crazier than starting a company is starting a defense company, because we do know that it is very difficult. As much as we want to help the DoD, it makes it very hard itself sometimes for us to do so. So what I'll say is, it just requires a lot of subject matter expertise. There's a lot of nuance to how you sell to the government, who to sell to. Right? The people who are actually end up using your software aren't usually the people who are going to pay you for it or how to help you actually get the contract. And so navigating that complexity is something that we've had to learn. Luckily, at Rune, our team is veterans, not just in the sense of having served in the military, but also in the sense of having served or worked in defense technology. And so we came to an advantage there in knowing how to do it, but it keeps us on our toes every day.
Would you be doing this if Ukraine weren't at war, or what was the impetus for this company?
We would still be doing it. The impetus is actually that in a past life, I had the opportunity to work on a different kind of problem set, which was called weapon target pairing, which is about matching targets to effectors. And I did that very effectively, and eventually asked myself, well, what if you could do the same thing for logistics, right? What if you had an island in the Pacific that's running low on fuel, but you knew where you had fuel and what ships or drones you had to get it there? Couldn't you match demand to supply? And when I asked that question, that's when I looked at logistics, saw that it was really the forgotten part of the military, right? And I was working with one of the most innovative defense companies at the time, and knew that there wasn't as much emphasis on there as ought to be. So Ukraine certainly showed that logistics matters, but we would be doing it either way, because we're preparing for conflicts that hopefully never happen.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. So what's next for 2026 for you all?
Right now, it's really expansion. 2025 was about sort of creating a beachhead, right? We are only a year and a half old. I think we are doing really incredibly so far at the pace that we're moving. But 2025 was about establishing ourselves, forming a beachhead, proving that we ought to exist, that we're allowed to exist. The market can be quite ruthless about that. So 2026 is really about capitalizing on the fact that we've proven that. So it's expanding deeper into the Army and the Marine Corps. It's expanding to other services. It's going up, it's going down. And it's also expanding to beyond logistics. One of the interesting things that's happened when we started working on logistics is that there's other parts of the military that are very intricately linked to logistics, like medical, for example, right? So medical evacuation, you wouldn't necessarily think of that as logistics because it's evacuating people instead of moving cargo. And yet those communities are very intricately linked. And so what we're noticing more and more is that there's similar communities that have not received enough attention. And so with what we've built with TIROS, we're already significantly helping those communities improve their processes and their speed because of the general platform that we've built. So that's what 2026 is also going to be about.
Well, Peter, thank you for joining us. So it's runetech.co, right?
That's right, runetech.co.
So we'll send all of our, I'm not exactly sure what kind of audience. We just have to make sure that we have some logisticians. I'll show it to my dad. He'll get a kick out of it.
Well, I think everyone should care about logistics. So, spread the word.
All right. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, John. This has been Resilience. We'll see you next time.